Okay, folks, we begin chapter 1 today. Chapter 1, if we were to sum it up in one word, would be neshamas. Neshama is soul. Neshamas is the plural, is souls. Where we're going over here is that we have two souls. And everything will be based on that idea. That will be ultimately where the struggle in life takes place. That's where everything ultimately, in a sense, takes place within us, that then we can deal with whatever issues, challenges, life, that's beyond us. So we need to understand who we are. That's the first thing. So the first thing is neshamas. But that's not even here at this moment in today's study. Today we begin actually with a bunch of questions. The Alter Rebbe begins chapter 1. Guess what word? Tanya. Tanya is actually an Aramaic word to mean we've learned. It's been learned. And it's specifically referring to a brisa as opposed to a mishnah. Then we use a different word, tanan. So Tanya means it's been learned. Where? In the end of the third chapter of Nida, it says, Mashbim Moisei Tiyeh Tzadik. A person is administered an oath before they come into this world that they should be righteous and not to be wicked. Plain and simple. Well, it's plain and simple. The word oath, shavua, also is the word for soveya, which means satiated. It means the soul is satiated with the power that it comes into this world and has to deal with, a dog-eat-dog world, has to deal with, challenges, darkness. We're given all of the power. Majbino, you say. You're empowered. You're given the oath. You're given the strength that you can deal with whatever you need to. So you should be righteous and not be wicked. Even if the entire world tells you, though, that you are righteous, in your own estimation, you should be as if you're wicked. That's the brisa. So Alter Rebbe says, well, this seems to be contradictory to what we learn in Pirkei Avos in the ethics of our fathers, that there it says that in your own estimation, you shouldn't be wicked. So we see a contradiction between a Mishnah, which carries greater weight than a Brisa, actually. But not for now. In any case, a contradiction that, no, you shouldn't be wicked in your own estimation. And yet, in our first teaching, yes, so the whole world's telling you you're righteous, in your own estimation, you should be as if you're wicked. Contradiction. Furthermore, that's in teachings, there's a contradiction. But in reason, there's also seemingly it's unreasonable. If you will be wicked in your own estimation, what's going to happen? You're going to be grieved at heart. You're going to be downtrodden because of that. Listen, I'm wicked. So, what's the point? Where am I going to go with all of this? And I'm not going to be able to serve God with joy as a result, which is something very important, which we'll learn a lot more about later. On the other hand, of course, if I'm not grieved at all by any self-appraisal, then of course I will then be led to dealing with God in an irreverent way, right? Because, well, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Sin doesn't matter. So obviously there's some kind of balance there. However, it seems to contradict this reasonable concept that we should be not looking at ourselves in a negative light. Very interesting how Tanya begins. Don't look yourself in a negative light is the question that we're asking. And in this world that we live in today, this is really an important point. Now, what does that mean? Of course, we'll get the answers later on in chapters 13, 14, 29, and 34. So we're going to have to hold on tight till we get there. That's the first question. So to understand this, we need to bring up another matter. And that is that we find in the Talmud that there are 5 gradations, types of people. A righteous who prospers, a righteous who doesn't prosper, the wicked that prosper, and the wicked that don't prosper, and a Beinoni, intermediate, which is who we want to ultimately get to. So, the Alter Rebbe says, based on the Talmud actually explains that the righteous who prospers, what does it mean? That they're a consummate righteous person. Why? Because not only did they have it good in spiritual terms, but they have it even good in material terms. Because they're not suffering materially, not suffering health-wise, livelihood-wise. Why would someone suffer? Is because part of suffering, and this is an important idea that we won't get locked into, but that which we'll deal more actually in the third part of Tanya. But suffering actually brings kapara, brings atonement, brings a cleansing. When we suffer in this world, the point of it is to cleanse us, which actually that in itself is a very important teachings, and that will lead us to, be able to deal with suffering in a healthier way. So it's meant to cleanse us. So if a righteous person isn't suffering, that means they're perfectly cleansed. A righteous person who's still suffering, that means they're not perfectly cleansed. That is the idea. That is the idea. Okay? Now, the Zohar continues and explaining these 5 distinctions. That is in a deeper way, but not a contradiction, just a more explanatory concept of the 5 divisions, is that the righteous one who suffers means that their evil nature is subservient to their good nature, meaning that there's still some vestige of evil there, but it's subservient to their good nature, that there's no real battle. There's no real battle. The complete righteous person, different story, completely righteous, and means that the evil is completely eradicated. Then the Talmud, in another place, explains and says that these levels of righteousness is what is the motivation. So the righteous are judged, meaning their motivation and their judgments that they make in their lives is based on their good nature. The wicked, their motivation, they're ruled by their evil nature. Right? They're by their evil nature. Beinoni zeh v'zeh shoftan. The Beinoni is judged, meaning they're motivated by, intermediate person, by good and evil. Of their nature, they have a good and evil nature. The Talmud continues and says, Rabbah, who was the leader of his generation, or at least one of the leaders, if not the leader, he declared about himself, I, for example, I'm a Beinoni. So said Abaye, his student, to him, Master, you make it impossible for any creature to live. Because if you're merely a Beinoni, that means we're less than you. We're less than you. And if we're less than you, that means we're a rasha, we're an evil person. And it says about an evil person that even when they're alive, they're really kind of dead. The living dead. In other words, not, it's not real life, being a wicked person. And therefore, this is what he says. How could we, the rest of us are not really alive. So, to understand this, right, the aforementioned 5 levels, the question over here of Abaya to Rabbah, how could it be that he sees himself as half and half, motivated by good and motivated by evil, half good, half bad, how do we understand that? So we need to understand another statement that's brought down in the Talmud about Job, Eov, that he says, you, God, have created the righteous man, and you, God, have created the wicked man. So the question is, what do you mean? God creates if you're going to be wise or foolish, if you're going to be tall or short, if you're going to be wealthy or not wealthy. But righteous or evil, that's freedom of choice. God doesn't take away our freedom of choice. That's the basis of Jewish teaching. So what does it mean that God created the righteous, he created the wicked? How do we understand that? So now, to understand that question, we have to then go into understanding the essential nature of the rank of the Beinoni, this intermediate person. What does it mean that they're an intermediate person? They're not righteous, they're not wicked. How do we understand that? How do we understand Rabbah, that he called himself a Beinoni, which is half and half, when he never stopped learning, so much so that the angel of death could not take him away? Well, that's a pretty lofty individual. And he only considers him a Beinoni. How could that be? How could he make such an error about himself that he would have half of his deeds are good and half of his deeds are sinful? Now, you can't say it was humility, because that's false humility. You don't fool yourself or fool others. Further, when is a person actually considered a Beinoni? Like, how does it work? Because if you did something sinful and you didn't repent, well, that means you have a stain on your soul. You have a sinning soul, so you're not, and if you repented, that means you have a cleansed soul. So either you're going to be righteous or you're going to be wicked. How's Beinoni fit in at any point? How do we understand that? And you can't say, well, that's maybe only on big things. No, that's not true. Even a minor prohibition of the rabbis, person is termed wicked if they transgress it. Even if it's only a rabbinic law. Even if you had to forewarn someone not to do something wrong, and you didn't do it, right? You didn't rebuke somebody that you're supposed to, according to Jewish law, let's say the instance, and you didn't do it, you're also considered as a sinner. Even if you didn't do it, right? Even if you're able to study Torah and you waste time and don't study Torah, a violation. So we must conclude that a Beinoni is not even guilty of the neglect of studying Torah, because Rabbah himself didn't neglect study of Torah. Yet he called himself a Beinoni. And therefore, we can understand why he mistook himself for a Beinoni, because a Beinoni doesn't even have the sin of wasting time. That where they could have studied Torah, they wasted time. That's the Beinoni. I mean, we must conclude from this. What it exactly is, we'll have to find out more, which we won't today. And that serves as a springboard to the response. The questions that we need to appreciate in order to get the response. So what are our questions? First one is why should you consider yourself as being evil? Contradiction in teachings and a contradiction in reasonable, appropriate way to serve God. So to understand that, we understand the 5 distinctions of people, different types of people, and levels where they're at in their divine service. And as we conclude from those 5 levels, 2 of a tzaddik, 2 of a rasha, wicked as it's translated, and 1 Beinoni, we conclude the story with Rabbah, who considered himself a Beinoni, and that we had great issue with. How could you be a Beinoni when you did not neglect even the study of Torah for a minute? Even for a minute. So obviously, you're not the traditional idea of what a Beinoni. You didn't. That's not what you're saying when you say Beinoni. You're just an intermediate, half and half kind of guy. No. It means that even the Beinoni doesn't have any sin. If they don't have sin, so what makes them different than a tzaddik? You need to understand that. Why do we need to understand this? Because we need to understand the different, where we're at and what our struggles are, what we need to deal with in life, and how to grow, and how to become, ultimately, this is a Sefer Shel Beinoni, to be the Beinoni. That's, so to speak, the goal. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Let's see if I can find something that is a question here. I like to right, don't be idle. Yo, from Philadelphia, thank you. Alice is asking, why is it important to know the difference between a Beinoni and a tzaddik if they act the same? Well, I guess probably that we shouldn't think ourselves to be righteous when we're not, because then we will let our guard down on a simple level. Wicked may be eradicated, but it's always in the shadows. So when we speak about, we want the wicked actions to be eradicated, but not the wicked themselves. Yeah. Counting down to Hanukkah. Yes, we are. We're going to find out about the righteous in chapter 10, the wicked in chapter 11, and the Beinoni in chapter 12 and onwards. And, those various levels. And most importantly, how do we deal with our lives? How do we deal in everything of our lives? So before you can deal with life, you need to know what defines life, who we are. That's where we're going. All right, folks. Sharing is caring. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Tzurich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining.